Hi everybody, I'm here in my house like usual. I had to remodel a bit to celebrate the ever-iconic Bobo the baboon finally coming home. Ever since I smuggled him out of the zoo, he's been quite the globetrotter. All summer long, he's been visiting his homeland of Japananana, which isn't Japan. It's a different country, it's a different language. He speaks Japanananese. He's not good at teaching it though. I only know a few phrases right now, which kind of reminds me of another beloved but questionable teacher. In 1986, at Wakerville Elementary School, a class of 20 kids were enrolled into Miss Frizzle's class where they participated in fun activities like watching bread mold, reading 5 science books a day, and learning about garbage. The class openly admits that they don't mind how weird she acts or dresses, just that her teaching could be more user-friendly and ordinary, especially for 9-year-olds. Like when each other individual class in the grade goes on cool field trips to the zoo and stuff, when in contrast, Miss Frizzle's class has to learn about how the city gains access to water, and nothing else for a straight month, only to eventually take a weird-looking school bus that's probably not magic on a field trip for this reason. But it's magic, shockingly enough, and of course the main gimmick of the magic school bus is the magic school bus. That needs no introduction, but Miss Frizzle is able to use the bus to emphasize whatever she wants to teach. Unfortunately, due to factors like the kids being unfamiliar with Miss Frizzle's capabilities, such as turning them to the same size as raindrops, there would eventually be a couple of casualties among the students. Miss Frizzle's class would tragically drop from a class of 20 to just 8.5. Miss Valerie Frizzle is an interesting woman. For every silly outfit she owns, there's a call to Child Protective Services. I feel like there's for sure some legal challenges that the Frizz is gonna get all frizzled with her Miss Frizzle hair for. I'm gonna assume the books, games, and show are all part of the same continuity to an extent. Some of the episodes are based off of books, some books are based off of the episodes. It matters as much as it doesn't. All of these adventures revolve around the same formula. The class is learning about something new, Frizzle takes them on a field trip, has some wacky hijinks ensue, someone almost dies, maybe everyone almost dies, and in the end, the class truly learns something new. Episodes specifically end with producer segments, which follows cartoon characters responsible for this cartoon being yelled at by kids on the phones. They basically do my job for me, just pointing out all the unrealistic stuff, killing all suspension of disbelief, like how there's thousands of bat species in this one episode about bats, yet the episode featuring them only has one type, or how ridiculous it is shrinking them down, or how Arnold almost died in space. Every time I think about this show, I think Arnold almost killing himself in front of the class just to prove a point to his shitty cousin. Just in general, the class goes through a lot, and nothing bad usually happens. Like that episode specifically doesn't have Arnold in any danger. He just ends the episode with a cold. None of the students really recognize the danger they're in sometimes. Speaking of which, who are the lucky gang that survived Miss Frizzle's water system field trip up 86? Well, you got some regular kids like Tim, Wanda, and Keisha. There's Dorothy Ann, who's fine. I can respect Ralphie for his sheer confidence radiating from wearing a giant neon initial of his name. That is a level of power I aspire to be at. And you got Carlos. How can you hate the pun master? Easily on the top of the tier list and the power rankings. He could be on the verge of death in a giant blender and be like, fellas, can you blend me a hand? He's great. Phoebe. Ugh, I do not like Phoebe. She's the new kid of the class. Her only character trait is mentioning how this is different from her old school. And this never stops across the 52 episodes. At my old school, we weren't turned into bees. Yeah, I think not, you fool. And going back to Arnold, well, Arnold is a bit different. Unlike the rest of the class, he's kind of, sort of, definitely out of his comfort zones with a lot of these field trips, and justifiably so. His hobbies are wearing glasses and staring at rocks. He's always advocating for more laid-back and normal field trips, and as punishment, the rest of the class got to check out his vital organs. To be fair, the same thing happened to Ralphie when he was sick. In fact, they broadcasted it from his TV. Ultimately, though, even ignoring all the times the class gets shrunk down, or changed, or some other third thing, Arnold has grown to love the way the Frizzle teaches as much as everyone else. Besides Janet. This is the half-student of the class, Arnold's cousin, not even in Frizzle's class, just being taken to some of the adventures sometimes. I used to not like Arnold because I confused the two of them with each other. She is just a bad person, not blessed with Frizzle's fun and freaky field trips. Easily bottom of the field trips, still competitively viable. She could beat Ralphie in a fight. But who cares about 10-year-olds? Their undeveloped prefrontal cortexes can't even spell refrigerator. You came here for the Frizz and probably also her lizard named Liz Art. What's the point of a class being taught if I don't teach you about the teacher who teaches? As simple as Frizzle's formula is to comprehend, there's some definite corners cut that would realistically have her fired at the very minimum. Easiest example, over the 50+ episodes, has anyone turned in a permission slip to go on a field trip? Did any parent give the okay to go to Arnold's circulatory system? Yes, actually. The episode Going Batty is about the parents going to a parent-teacher conference, and Ralphie's mom mentions that the boy simply loves the field trip, meaning that at minimum, Ralphie's family does it. And since his mom is a doctor and a doctor is a smart occupation, I'm just gonna assume that every family approves, except for Carlos. He definitely forges his permission slips. He's too cool for consent. No, not that other kind. Somehow this episode ends with the class believing that Frizzle is a vampire and gonna make their parents vampires, which like, no, she's been in daylight, you're stupid. And then they turn into bats and do things like drink dirty water and eat bugs. Typically, the class will travel to their given location, and then either shrink or transform, sometimes both. Becoming bats is one of the worst offenders, but some trips include being turned into all kinds of bugs, almost being cooked into a pie, potentially breaking and entering to learn about sound, lots and lots of shrinking into people to learn about their vital organs and stuff. I don't think driving a vehicle relying on gasoline should be exploring anything inside a child's vital organs, but that's fine, Ralphie's got an R on his shirt. Perhaps one of the greatest atrocities committed in the show's classic run was from the episode Going Upstream. I don't know how much I can show or explain this episode, but essentially Frizzle wants to teach the class about salmon migration. Okay, that's pretty normal. What else happens? You might be scratching your little stubby chinny chin chin. Well, Miss Frizzle turns the bus into a salmon. Specifically a mom salmon, and they play Trivial Pursuit. And then she turns the kids into salmon eggs, then newborn salmon, and casually has the children experience the first few months of salmon life. Could you imagine explaining that to your parents after school? Eventually, after Miss Frizzle had dozens of cool field trips with her class, while most of the lamer classes with normal school buses only got 1 to 2, she said to herself, alright, it's been fun, I've had as much Wanda as anyone can handle, I'ma get a PhD. And she does just that. Time skip. In the distant future of whenever the hell this takes place year-wise, I don't know, at least a summer vacation away from the original series, tickle my tonsils, the Frizz has become Professor Frizzle. That's good because it is. But that also means that she's gonna leave the class. This is where we meet the second Frizzle, Fiona Frizzle, who's taken the mantle of Miss Frizzle and sure is a person with skin and stuff. She gets the bus, Liz, but not the family monkey or motorbike that is only for the perfizzly and the shizzly with a PH diddly. From this point on, we follow the class in the Netflix show The Magic School Bus Rides Again. And oh boy, this fell off harder than my grandma falling off the stair lift. And by that I mean it wasn't a hard fall, it was just a clear stumble from its former glory. It's passable for Magic School Bus. Apparently in the Frizzled household, child neglect is hereditary. To an extent, this reboot continuation thing is lacking what made the original special, but truthfully it's more Magic School Bus. They get shrunken down to the size of snowflakes, one gust of wind and they become tiny red blood splatters. They still endure harsh climates like lava and stuff, just your typical class learning opportunities. Going back to the permission slip talk, Arnold actually reveals that in this reboot, at minimum, riding the snowflakes wasn't really mentioned on the permission slip that his parents needed to sign, and overall this time skip doesn't really do any justice to the kids regardless. Arnold looks like Alan Gregory, Ralphie's ever-iconic R is missing, Carlos has a rat named Ratney, but tragically also now wears a red hoodie. The change in color has me feeling kinda blue, just like Carlos. And Phoebe is gone. Instead, she's replaced by Jyoti, which is fine. I kinda zoned out with this kid. I had 15 years to get emotionally attached to the rest of the class. With her, it's been 15 minutes. Really, the only major difference I could potentially note between the two Frizzles when considering teaching is that the new Miss Frizzle seems to be straight up a little less adapted to all the crazy gunk per Frizzle had the class endure. Gone are the days of turning the class into salmon fetuses. Now we learn about things like weather and trees, just like in the original series. The class kinda redoes a lot of field trips, and given this is supposedly supposed to be in the same continuity, it's kinda weird at points how they're just going over the same treaded ground. At first, the class, especially Arnold, is like, damn, she kinda sucks, but in the end, the new Miss Frizzle is about the same slightly wacky, deranged science teacher from before. Funnily enough, the final episode at this point sees the principal, who, by the way, has aged a ton between the two shows. The children explaining that they went through a chicken ass during one of their field trips is what broke him. Joining the class on a field trip to the center of the sun. How are you getting away with the permission slips? What are you writing on him? This episode is especially crazy to me because the idea is that the bus is running low on power and they travel to the sun, which is something they established at the start. The heat of the sun has replaced gasoline at this point. Eventually, during the expedition, they run out of power to both recharge and make it home, only having enough power to send a single escape pod to recharge the bus. And Arnold, the only kid who wanted a normal field trip, has grown to really like Frizzle's class, despite not really showing it sometimes, selflessly throwing himself into the center of the sun so everyone can go home. I also want to throw out there that Miss Frizzle wasn't even sure they were going to make it out of this one alive. And if I had a nickel for every time Arnold voluntarily nearly killed himself in the depths of space, I'd have 2 nickels. This is as much of a coincidence as it is a call for help. Also, instead of the producer segments, episodes now end with Frizzle riding a magic motorbike with her pet monkey. I don't know why this requires a PhD, but you know, if this is what it's take, I'll also get a PhD. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, funnily enough, I mean the journey to teach for the Frizzles is questionable, but the destination is always reached, and they always manage to get their messages across. I don't think we can necessarily say the unique way that Frizzles teach doesn't have results. The students within them go on adventures they consider fun and memorable a majority of the time, and it's clear that the Frizzles are passionate about how they do things. It's just like remarkably flawed when you think about it. Professor Frizzle throughout the series repeats the phrase, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. And I would say that's the best description of how they do things in Frizzle's class in Wakerville Elementary. They want students to learn through their own experience and participation rather than just listening to a lecture and reading books and being expected to memorize it all. In this hilarious backward way of teaching, ignoring all the child endangerment and whatnot, it's effective. Which is the craziest part, but hey, the students seem to be doing well in classes, they seem to excel compared to their peers, they make Janet look like shit, and in the end, isn't that what we all want? I think that was part of what made the franchise work as well as it did. The point of Frizzle's teaching is to show the class rather than tell. These experiences, despite possibly unexisting roughly 12 to 13 other students, are important. Even though the kids were hesitant about their teachers, these lessons are gonna stick with the students forever. They'll always be able to recite fun facts about the human body because they travel inside their fellow classmates several times over. They can easily explain the migration process of salmon because they were part of it. They can easily talk about the time they were in a pie because they were in a pie. I'm sure a lot of us were alongside the kids and remembered everything in part just from watching it all. It's great. And if you don't think that, Miss Frizzle probably knows where you live. I guess what I'm trying to say is the lesson of today's lesson is don't leave your children unattended with gingers. Wow, that was quite the discussion. I hope you enjoyed because you better believe that I did. Just like Carlos does it, Bobo, I did it again.